G'day guys, Clint Adams here, recording episode number 61 of The Full Landscape with the Honorary Blair Boyer, Minister for Education, Training and Skills here in South Australia. Blair is a new minister in a new government, and they are actively working towards helping with the skills shortage that we are experiencing in the landscape industry. I've been speaking to Blair off camera and obviously now on camera about this. This podcast will hopefully shed some light on what he's doing and what their government are doing. But I have commitment from him that he's going to help us improve the awareness around landscaping in government and in the public eye, as well as filling some of those shortage gaps and streamlining the licensing process. So can't ask for much more. Hopefully you enjoy this one. If you haven't subscribed, please do so. But that's enough from me. Here is Blair Boyer. Let's get to it because I don't want to... I know you've probably got a million things to do. If you, I guess to get started, if you want to give us a bit of an introduction about your background and how you got to where you are in politics.
Yeah, sure. My name is Blair. I'm the Minister for Education, Training and Skills. I have been since the March election last year, so not particularly long. I entered Parliament in 2018 for a northeastern suburb seat called the seat of Wright, which the middle of is kind of Modbury Heights and some suburbs around it. Grew up on a farm in southwest Victoria, down near a place called Portland, which is just an hour from Mount Gambier. So on the family farm, but my old man was a teacher at the local public school in Portland, which is the school I went to. Not the kind of area or background that would normally be associated with politics, particularly in the Labor Party. Came from a family that was very much in terms of their political views, of the other persuasion to me. But my parents were both always very involved, politically aware, something that we spoke about at the kitchen table a lot.
Even as a youngster, that
particularly.
You'd be hearing it more than...
Oh, absolutely. Yep. Compared to other families and stuff like that, it was a regular source. You know, had to watch the ABC News every night as a family and stuff like that. You know, we only had basically 3 stations, and I was only allowed to watch one of them, really, which is not entirely
The other 2 were the fun ones.
Yeah, the other 2 were the fun ones, exactly right. Went to university, studied arts and law at Monash. I met my wife there in 2000, and we've obviously been together for quite a while. Got 3 young daughters who go to school out in the northeast. And in terms of getting involved in politics, I had an opportunity in Victoria a long time ago to work for the Victorian Agriculture Minister. It was my first job kind of in politics, and I did that for a couple of years. Labor lost government there. There was a job advertised here. My wife and I thought, we like Adelaide, we'll come over here for a bit. Fell in love with the place straight away, basically, and stayed, and worked for the former Labor government here in a few different capacities. And then I was living in the northeast. There was a retirement, got the opportunity to run. Was fortunate enough to get elected in 2018, and now I find myself here.
So how does that work? And one of my questions was why Labor?
Yep.
Because obviously, the politics is quite it intrigues me, and. I think, in another world, I'd be doing it.
Yes, yep, I see you doing that.
But it's not...
You're too sensible to do it, though.
Well, I don't like the criticism. And when 47 or 48% of the people don't agree with you, then...
And that is right, and that's the case in my seat.
Yeah.
Is that right?
Yeah.
It's a 50-50 kind of seat. So.
What was it prior to you taking power? Was it a Liberal seat?
No, it was Labor. It has been for a while, but always like a marginal meaning close to switching.
Yeah.
And it's the northeast. I mean, well. It's a kind of.
I'm in the northeast. I don't think I'm in your electorate, but yeah.
You're not. You're in the neighbouring one, but the demographics are identical to where you are, to where I live, and it's always going to be a kind of 50-50.
Yeah, that makes sense. I mean, I'm a business owner living in it's a Labor seat now.
Yes,
but it was a Liberal seat prior. Yeah,
correct.
And so does someone approach you, or you just at a Labor event and they're like, "You young man, you're just what we're looking for."
Yeah, you'd like it to be like that, but it's less like that and more like you need to sort of make a case for why. Put your hand up and say, "I'm interested in being an elected member."
Yeah,
and then you need some good fortune, I think, as well, in terms of where a vacancy might come up, and then you need the local members of the party, called the sub branch in that area, have to actually choose you to be their candidate. So that's
and then you've got to go run and win the seat.
So there's multiple different steps, and it is tough, but in a marginal seat. It's like at the first election, 2018, I personally door knocked every house in the seat that I now represent. That's 13,500 homes.
You hit every door?
Yep.
And answered half or
40-something% is normally the strike rate. Yeah. And a lot of members of Parliament from all different political parties, particularly in those seats that are really hard fought and won, would do the same thing, and it is unforgiving kind of work. It's
proper grassroots.
You're out in 40-degree heat, just walking in the street by yourself, knocking on a door. You might get yelled at on one door. You might.
Oh, great, you're here.
Yeah. It's not like, oh, it's so good to see our local member of parliament. Please come in and let me get you a cold drink. It's
because the member that was the Liberal member in our electorate was always at school sports day, and then I remember growing up and having like Frances Bedford at school, handing out certificates and even there was a guy that was there, but they were always there, and and then it's a branding exercise, right?
Yep.
But you're not running Facebook ads because you're branding to the only 1,300 houses.
Correct. That's exactly right. And you've got to, you've got to keep turning up to things too. Like a lot of it is going to events and being there and listening to people and doing the hard yards like that. That's an important thing. School sports days, particularly I think in Australian politics, you can't sit back and expect people to come to you.
Yep.
You've got to make the effort to get out and say, I know you might not like politics and politicians, but can I have a chat to you about what we're doing, and you can tell me if you like it and the things that we should be doing better. You're not going to sit in your office and people aren't going to come and say, oh.
Well, the only things you're going to get then is letters and phone calls of problems, not ideas, right?
Exactly. And a lot of people just won't share at all. People won't answer their phone, or that you have to go and knock on their door if you want to hear their opinion and you want to support them. And I often find that once you've done that, and you show that you're serious about helping them, they'll they mightn't vote for you, but they're willing to have a conversation and say, no?
Well, it appears, and I haven't really watched politics deeply, and maybe the last state government, but I've watched more to watch what has been promised and what's being delivered.
Yes.
And I think when people see that, they're like, wow, okay, they said they'd do that, and they've done it, and they said they'll do that, and they've done it.
And that's what the Premier is huge on. He's every cabinet meeting that we have. He reminds all the ministers about what we promised and that we have to deliver it. He is absolutely ironclad that when we promise things, we deliver them. There are no ifs and buts.
That's how he is, or do you think? I guess obviously you'll have another election in.
That's a good question. Yes, that's how Peter is, but I think he saw from the outgoing government there were cases where they weren't able to do it. I won't go into the reasons. I'm not casting blame on them, but they didn't, and people got very shirty about that and angry, and people were like, well, what are your promises worth? And Peter's been, we're going to only promise things that we can deliver, and then when we're in, we are going to deliver them.
It's really interesting, the parallels to the landscape. Like, obviously, we met at the Landscape Association dinner, and I'm now the president of the association. I've only been in that position since October, so it's really new to me.
Congratulations.
Thank you. I think people say that to me. I'm like, you sure it's congratulations? And it's probably the same when you win a seat.
Well, it's a big job for you guys though, because you're running a business on top of it, and you take those roles on. And on
they're volunteer roles, and because you want to see the world, your part of the world to be a better place.
But the upside for you is there isn't really. It's just.
I think you probably get a bit of positive optics in the market, and people. But
you've already got a strong.
Well, that's right. We're fine anyway. Right. I didn't need it.
No, you're doing it because you believe in your industry, and it's a big industry, and they're lucky to have you. But it's a lot of work.
It is, and it's funny to hear you say if you don't ask, they won't tell you. We had an event recently where we said, let's have a street corner. Come and tell us what you want. What do you want from? That's
very
the
grassroots
board,
politics,
right?
That's what we call them, street corner meetings.
No one can, right?
Yeah.
So then you're like, well, so do we just assume that as elected members we can do what we think's right for you?
Can I share something on that? Because that's a really good tool. Because I do street corner meetings, we all do, and often not many people come. And that's normally the observation of lots of members of parliament. But what I've found in my time since doing them, because we letterbox to say there's a street corner meeting happening here, you can come and visit Blair and say hello, is that the week after people say, oh, I meant to come and see you. I didn't get there, but it's great to see you doing those things. So they like to see that you're making
there's
the
optics of it.
Yeah.
And it's funny because one of the other board members is like, well, we did it, and I guess we can just assume that everything's fine.
It shows that you guys are willing to take feedback. And I think
that's all I want.
People believe in the system more, including what you're doing. They're all right. Well, if you guys are willing to front up and talk to us, then you've probably got nothing to hide.
I'm doing, we did a video went live today. I'll do a video after the board meeting to explain what we talk, because I found that
that's smart.
No one understood what was going on, and people are like, "What do you actually do?"
So people fill in the blanks. Then they're like, "Oh, geez,
they're probably sitting around drinking, spending our membership dollars on stupid shit."
So it's exactly the same as politics. Yeah. So you've got to get out there and tell the story. Say, "Well, actually, I'm doing this," and if you've got hard questions you want to ask me, go for it.
Yep, and that's, I think it's interesting because your government is aware, and you can see it, that it's not just Channel 7, Channel 9, Channel 10. It's social media. It's,
It's so splintered now how people get news and listen to stuff. You can't just do the nightly news thing or a full-page ad in the paper because you won't get to people. So it's constant frustration for me. It's like, get on these social media platforms and my staff are like, okay, we're going to do something for that platform, we've got to do it like this because that's how things work on that platform.
Yeah, you got to think about the audience's frame of mind while they're digesting information on Facebook versus TikTok versus Snapchat.
See? Yeah. And then next minute I'm doing some dancing video for TikTok, and I'm like, how did I get here? Like,
it's interesting because I'm seeing Peter's content and yours because I think I follow both, and it's unique. And I saw you did one was it you in Parliament? With headphones on?
Yeah, it was
right?
Which was mortifying.
I can imagine. And probably more embarrassing filming it than putting it out, right? Because you're walking through there going, but you have, especially considering that your portfolio touches birth onwards,
correct?
Right? A lot of the other portfolios probably don't touch
I don't.
to the 20s or 30s because aged care, for example, right? That's so far away from you don't need to be doing TikToks, but you've got the next generation.
I'm trying to talk to kids about things like the mobile phone ban or whatever it might be, but I do find that stuff kind of mortifying to do. But I think it's important for
you've got to be vulnerable.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, and you've got to be prepared to take the piss out of yourself, and show that you don't take yourself very seriously.
You're human, right?
Yeah.
Like I guess for the benefit of people listening and watching, Blair wasn't concerned about what I was going to talk about. I guess there's no questions that are off limits. I don't go.
There's not.
I never go personal with any of my guests, but I think that there would have been a period in time, and I don't really know, where you'd get more of a structured, the politicians wouldn't be sitting on I mean, this is a grassroots podcast. It's very, I mean, it's connected to your portfolio, but
the best stuff.
It's where people are sitting down listening for an hour, and they'll go, that's interesting.
It's amazing. The first one of these I did, and this is only the second I've done, but the first one was with Master Builders.
I listened to that 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, so people listen to it, and it gives a politician in particular a very rare opportunity to talk about things in detail and in a relaxed setting about other stuff. Otherwise, it's like...
It's a soundbite.
Yep.
On Triple M or SAFM or whatever, and they're like, oh, the minister's on the line. Yep. And the problem is you have to then sell. Because whether or not it's paid for or not, you've only got 30 seconds.
Yeah, exactly right. You've got to narrow your message right down for 30 seconds. What's the thing here we want people to hear? And then all these complicated issues you try to boil them down into things you can't because it's too complicated. So I'm loving how this kind of stuff is happening now. And I like a chance to be able to talk about things that aren't just policy.
You'll get invited more now. Like obviously you had one. I think it gives podcasters a comfortability level that you'd say yes.
Oh yeah, okay.
And that you'd do it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, that's what I don't think of. I don't think anyone would think I'd say no. But you forget people associate you with the position and think, oh, they wouldn't want to do this thing. But I'm looking for opportunities.
Well, there would be potentially candidates that won't do a podcast, right? Then it's not they would disagree with the medium that they're probably at the end of their career, not at the start.
They might be worried about what question they might.
Yeah, or you do something. You've got a whole hour. Especially if you're fake.
Yeah, you're going to struggle with that.
How are you going to sit? You're going to be fake for an hour.
Yeah, and it's got to be a conversation. We're sitting here with a coffee at a table.
Yeah.
So if you can't do a conversation,
then and that's the hard thing. Like
struggle.
And I think Australian politics is probably going to be one of the more capable countries.
Well, it should be. The thing that amazes me though, sometimes it doesn't happen often in Australia, but some people who get involved in politics who I think don't actually like people. I think they're attracted to the roles and they might like the policy and have good ideas, but they hate having to go out and talk to members of the parliament. I enjoy that. I grew up on a farm in a very small community. You talk to everyone. When you went to get milk at the general store, it was a half-hour conversation with some neighbour who went to school with your grandpa. So you just learnt to have a chat. I think kids these days, an important skill they're still going to have. How do you have a chat with someone?
I mean, that's probably part of that. The desire to have a mobile phone ban in schools, right? Yeah. So that in those break times, their eyes are up.
Exactly.
It is hot in here, and I'm sorry.
No, it's not. I'm a mad sweater anyway.
Yeah.
No, you are exactly right. And some of the feedback that we're getting already from schools that have brought it into effect is just more socialisation in recess and lunch. Kids talking with no phone.
No. So growing up, obviously, you went into law.
Yep.
Were you pushed into law, or?
It's a very good question, and I never wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah.
When I studied it, I wanted to be a lawyer less. When I worked as an article clerk in a firm, I wanted to be a lawyer even less. Yeah. And it just went down and down and down. But I'm not sure I would change my course because I found arts and law a good kind of grounding for other things because of the skills that kind of taught you. But I've never really had a desire to work as a lawyer, and I still don't. But yes, I think it was like a taught important skills and things like that. But I've often thought about what I'd do if I had my time again, if I'd choose something differently. But
well, you obviously have to read briefings.
Yes,
right. So
that's right.
I mean, that's obviously going to set you up for that. I couldn't do it. That would probably be my issue. I'd have to have audio briefings. I'd get it converted to audio files and then listen to it.
That's how I listen to my books now.
Me too. I love it.
Aren't they?
Yeah, just driving or whatever. And,
exactly right. It's good, isn't it?
What kind of books do you listen to?
Oh,
more like as in like business or crime?
Oh no, like
fiction.
Fiction.
Yeah.
Fiction. I like historical fiction. It might be the Robert Harris books around Second World War, where some of it's the actual fact, and then
it's inspired by the war.
Yeah, exactly right. That kind of stuff.
That's interesting. And it's
I want to
probably,
escape. I don't want to listen to it.
Yeah, your day is so intense.
Yeah.
And it is, right? Like
it is.
I mean, you got dropped off. You can't waste time driving.
No. Well, it's weird having a driver. I have to say, it's taken a long time to get used to it. But I spend the time reading files. And
that's bipartisan,
files.
right? Like, you've got the seat, you got the car.
Yep. Well, so ministers get that.
Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
On the ministership, do you choose a portfolio, or does a portfolio choose you?
Premier chooses the portfolios.
Yep.
So in the Labor Party, the sort of caucus, which is all our elected members, collectively kind of decide which of the MPs then becomes a minister who gets to be responsible for a portfolio, and the Premier chooses who has what portfolio.
Okay, so you guys win the seat.
Told.
You win the seat.
Yep.
You go in with the leader.
Yep.
Very likely they're going to maintain premiership.
Yes.
After the election's won.
Yes.
And they're legitimately the boss.
Yes.
They choose.
In terms of choosing portfolios, so they don't get to
it's not
choose
a
by
democracy.
themselves who goes into cabinet.
Yep.
The party does that collectively, which is a good thing.
Yep.
But in terms of what area each minister looks after, if they've got education or health, the Premier personally gets to choose that.
And so, I guess, did it make sense to you? Like,
I wouldn't have ever dreamed of having a different portfolio.
This is the one that you would have chosen if you could have chosen it.
Yeah, public education and education more broadly, not just public, because as the minister, I am the minister for the whole system, not just the public system.
Yep.
But I had a dad who was a teacher, grew up in a country area. It's always been important to me, and I've loved having the training and skills side of things as well, because they fit in really well with education.
Yep.
Like that should be a kind of continuum, like you said, birth all the way through.
Yeah.
They should be together so we can plan it all out properly.
Well, you see, otherwise there's disconnect, and I want to talk about licensing and landscaping, and obviously it's a landscaping-driven podcast.
Yep.
But once I'm looking at, like, there's the Office of Consumer and Business Affairs, then there's the education arm, and then there's this, and like if they're not all talking to each other, well, it doesn't. Like,
and that happens in government.
Well, and it's not from a lack of desire, from what I can tell. It's just that's the bureaucracy of
siloed, get in the way of each other.
Yeah.
It's frustrating, and it happens. So one of the things we can do to get around that is to have them all together.
Yep.
So I get to be the minister who does preschools and early year stuff through to primary and secondary and vet studies as well, which is great. And there's opportunities to do good things across it all.
Yeah.
So I feel very fortunate in the portfolios I've got. I know I'm very, very lucky to have these portfolios.
I've never really thought about which one I'd want. I don't think I'd want any of them, but
there are some have more upside than others, I would have to say. Education it's a big system, so there's always kind of something maybe not great happening every day. But the reverse is
there's also hospitals and healthcare, and
it's a tricky one.
that would be a tough one.
It's a really tough one. It is a really, really tough one.
Because no matter what you do, you build a whole new hospital, there's going to be a problem.
Well, that's exactly right.
And then the other people are saying, "Where's the money coming from?"
Yes. Although those big tough portfolios like health, upside is that if you can do some good, you change and save lives. Same as education. Like you can really, because people are normally motivated to get into this role because they want to make the world better.
Yeah.
I still look at it that way.
Yep.
So you want a portfolio where you get that chance to
it's not,
do it.
And people will laugh or disagree with me, but it's not that well paying compared to what most of the politicians could get in the open market.
Some, I'm sure, could get paid
and
more.
Look,
That's the perennial. I mean, I feel.
Yeah.
I struggle with the amount we earn, to be honest, when I see people battling with cost of living and stuff like that. But the flip side of that, like you just said, is, well, if you want to attract people from outside the normal kind of...
that are skilled and talented to drive that change.
Yes, or from the private sector, for instance, then you're going to have to offer them something which is like that, I guess. Otherwise, we are just going to have sort of similar people. As
potentially. You're either going to get middle range skill or you're going to get high level skill that want to change the world.
Yes. Yeah, well, that's right.
That's
going to be one of those
case.
Perennial debates, though, isn't it, about what politicians get paid. And
I had lunch with a former politician last week.
Yep.
And I said something about it, and he's like, look, the reality is some are underpaid and some are overpaid.
That's probably very fair.
And that's, he goes, there's two or three I can tell you they lived the business. they had no life outside of it.
Yes.
And there's others that are maybe not.
I think that's probably, and it's probably true of every profession. And
100%,
politics is the
100%.
same.
Yeah,
but there are some who literally work. You know,
if they're awake,
you could work yourself into an early grave.
I mean, Peter's probably. I mean, I think
I don't know how he does what he does.
He's talked about consciousness around. I mean, he took a day off.
Yeah.
And was quite public about it, I guess, to try and highlight to the people the importance of finding that balance. But the reality is,
people who think,
for 3 or 4 years,
it's all glitz and glamour, and it is relentless work. And Peter has a young family, 3 young kids. He's trying to make all that work, and everyone wants a piece of his time. Like, we get him to come out regularly to do street corners or shopping centres or something like that, and I've been at lots of those with Peter, and it is literally a queue of people waiting to speak to the Premier.
Well, that's just. I mean, even now, like as the president of the MLSA, we have licensing reform we want. We've got education issues we want to talk about. Now, that's obviously that comes through you, and then you do the heavy lifting, and it gets pushed up. Right. But then there's going to be people that are like, no, I just want to talk to the Premier.
Correct.
Well, you can't.
No,
right?
That's right. And Peter makes time for them all. Like he'll just stand there until they're done. I was at the SACE Merit ceremony at Government House on Thursday night.
Yep.
And at the end of it, everyone else had gone apart from this big procession of families, and Peter just standing there, and his staff member and I were just there saying, "You're next. You're next." Yep. And he stayed there until there was no one left at Government House.
There you go.
There was no one left. He heard them all out.
That's good.
It is great, but it takes.
But then he has to go to sleep, wake up, and go to work.
Yep, he was off to see the family then and do it all again. That's every day for Pete. It takes a certain kind of person.
Well, if you want the job, that's. I mean,
and it's exactly what he would say.
You don't enter into it.
No, he would say exactly the same, and he does love it, and it's amazing. But sometimes I wish more could see, what he puts into it, and what every premier puts into it in terms of. I think
the reality is people are going to complain about it, regardless, right?
Yeah.
Like there'll be people that run businesses or that work in high-profile positions, or they're just very aware of how the world works.
Yep.
They're going to be less likely to complain about any politician.
Yes.
The people that are going to complain are going to complain.
And there'll always be those people. That's right. And again, Peter and other premiers would say they went into the job with eyes wide open. They know that's what it's going to be like. But
would you do that job?
I don't think I'd want to do that job.
Yeah. Yeah. I guess at this stage anyway.
Peter's going to be there for a very long time. It's not, it won't be me. I can tell you that. So,
I don't know if you can answer this, but he'll be there for another 4 after this.
He'll be there as long as he wants, I would imagine. He's a remarkable effort to get us back into government after 4 years. He's.
You think you could do 4 terms?
I don't know.
Yeah,
but
obviously
but Peter in such a short space has got us back into government. Yeah. I think has already created a really strong sort of persona or reputation on the national stage, which is not usual for South Australian premiers either.
Yeah.
Like he's out doing that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Look at the gather round stuff he did with AFL.
I laugh when
Peter's there as long as Peter wants to be there.
I laugh when I see the other premiers giving us shit.
I know.
And you're like, are you serious?
Yeah, but that was. I totally agree. You know what? That's a gift though. It's a gift
because it puts another spotlight on Adelaide.
It does.
And then
Peter's like,
What
sounded like a desperate guy saying, "I'm going to lash out and complain." Adelaide, but
it's like if we had more of it, we don't have more days.
No,
there are no more days for events in South Australia.
Exactly
it's locked unless you want to do like I don't know, winter stuff. But
exactly, and it was interesting too. I thought the response, sort of from the kind of media and commentary in South Australia and the public wasn't, "Oh yeah, he's right. Why don't we get stuff?" It was, "Hang on. This is not right."
Yeah,
it was.
Here's the boom, 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 boom,
that's
boom.
Right.
Like I think his team put out a TikTok or of to a
that's right
song to a current song, and it was just
TikTok.
Like boom, boom, boom.
Yeah,
anyway.
Exactly right. But,
Obviously the podcast is called The Full Landscape. I want to be conscious to make sure that we bring some value to the landscapers that will be listening. Last week I did a podcast with the owners of an RTO called RO, which they've recently just bought it. So they're New South Wales business owners that have bought into South Australia. Obviously seen opportunity around everything that's going on here, and it's quite it's horticulture, landscaping, like that kind of external work. I guess for those people listening, if you can talk to us about the difference between TAFE and RTOs, and then recently your government's announced a TAFE. What is it? Fee-free TAFE.
Fee-free TAFE. Yes.
That's not just fee-free TAFE. That's fee-free education.
Yes, there's more. I can go into that.
If you can expand on that, because I really want. I want to be able, at the end of this, and it's not a lot of time, and hopefully people can follow up if they need to, but I really want to be able to give people an understanding of if you want to become a landscaper, and obviously your portfolio covers more than landscaping, but for the benefit of this, where would you go to learn? And they talked about that. And then what's the government's awareness around that skill shortage? And I know you guys are deeply across it. And then what
good. That's where you'd like to go.
Yeah, cool.
Yeah. Well, first of all, yes, because I think you and I had a chat about at your gala dinner about.
Sorry, it's so hot in here.
It's all right. I'm fine.
You're good.
We spoke about what training providers your members and stuff use, and you said there was RO who understand have a very, very good reputation in the industry, and you've got TAFE as well, and there are some. Just checking my information, but we've got Cert 3 in horticulture and Cert 3 in landscape construction are on the fee-free list.
Yep.
So 12,500 fee-free places all up for this year. That's the first year of what will eventually be a longer agreement, but we're working on the longer agreement now. But we wanted to get the first year up and running because the skill shortage is here now.
Yep.
10,500 of those spots are TAFE, but the other 2,000 are going to be other providers.
So it's locked that TAFE get 10.
Yes, 10, that's right. Yep. But not all jurisdictions, I think, are doing it that way. So I was very, and this gets to the point that RO and other private RTOs make around what TAFE gets funded and what they get funded, that I want to make sure that I needed to be certain that whoever received the funding for the fee-free places had the capacity to actually deliver those places. And TAFE were very honest about what they thought they could do, and so that was 10.5, and then 2,000 are out. I think we'll have an announcement on that soon for non-TAFE providers to be able to get some of that funding as well, which will be good. So I don't take the position in South Australia that it's TAFE or nothing. I know we have a lot of fantastic providers which are either not-for-profit or for-profit like RO, who do really, really fantastic work, and that we would be stuck in South Australia if we didn't have them. And I understand there's, for many years, there's been a source of frustration around the subsidy rates that TAFE is given as the public provider compared to others. And the point I always make around that is one of the issues we have, and we will always have in South Australia, is that we are, in population sense, a small state, geographically a really big state, and it is very expensive to offer things. And we try to offer, training and education opportunities for South Australians, no matter where they live. We have TAFE campuses on the APY lands in the most remote parts of Australia. We have it at all corners, and it's expensive to have those. But if TAFE didn't receive the funding it gets, it would not be able to offer training providers in some of those remote places. So that's just kind of a characteristic of the way our state is and will always be. It's one of the great things about our state too. We've got many beautiful regional and remote places, and we have relatively small populations living in them. You look at Victoria, regional centres with a couple of 100,000 people. So
just so I understand, I guess you almost have to make sure TAFE get a certain amount of funding, otherwise we don't have TAFE.
Yeah, that's basically
and if we don't have TAFE, those regional areas don't have education for their population.
That's right.
And I know RO's argument would be we're doing stuff everywhere, right? But that's also, I think that's new, and it's not scaled yet, right?
Yes.
And obviously you guys might not be across that, but because they were saying they had one, was it Renmark? They had one student in Renmark, so they'd go there and service. Yeah, they'd service it, and I think they're working on a model of we just do everything and we'll lose on some, but as a whole, the business will become stronger.
Well, I've got to say, as the Minister, it's amazing to hear that RO's doing that. That's incredible. And I take my hat off them for doing that, and I acknowledge there's a real cost to them as well.
And look, they just figure, then we can get 2, then we can get 3, then we can get 4, and then hopefully we have a region where we can drive in an educator and do 2 days or whatever.
But build it up from there.
I think... And it's interesting to hear you explain it like that, because there's always 2 sides to it, and when you hear both sides, you're like, okay, that makes sense. Because if TAFE didn't get that funding, and TAFE disappear, it does fall back on private.
There would just be no training though. In a lot of our in a lot of regional spots, in some because not everyone will do what RO is doing and go for a regional, and I don't expect them to either as Minister. But if TAFE couldn't do that, they're going to shut campuses in more places in regional areas, and we have lost a lot over the years in regional areas, and it means how do you then sort of provide certainty?
Well, then the government would have to heavily incentivise private enterprise,
correct,
and it would go the other way.
That's right.
I think the issue is that what they're doing is so new that if it was being done on a complete state scale, there'd probably be less likelihood that there'd be a requirement to fund TAFEs heavily, and it might swing the other way. But
yes, yeah, but I acknowledge what Ara is saying, but we are in a particularly tight situation here. Probably WA is like us as well. Small population, like second biggest city, 25,000 people.
Yeah.
Outside Adelaide,
Yeah.
It's hard to make the economies of scale stack up for any private provider, let alone TAFE. But we have to keep that going. Otherwise, those regional centres, what can they offer people who are living there or who want to move there in terms of your opportunities for things like training and increasingly now things like childcare? Like I've got communities coming to me as education minister saying we have no childcare. So.
And private enterprise are not likely to go build a childcare centre there because then they got no customers.
And they're not, exactly. You hit the nail on the head. They're not, and I don't expect them to if it doesn't add up. But that's where government's got to step in.
Yeah,
I see that as a role of government.
See, that probably makes a lot more sense to an everyday conversation. Like, there's not enough babies to cover the cost of building a building.
That's right.
But then when you look at it from an education standpoint, it's exactly the same, just at a different age level.
Exactly, and it's a chicken and the egg kind of thing. If we've got the area to grow, you've got to have childcare. The area is not big enough to have childcare, so you're back and forward with this silly argument. So I've always thought there's a really strong role for government always to play, but particularly I think in the South Australian context, because we have those small places where the market might not have the numbers or economies of scale to move in, and that's understandable. So there's a role for government where it can to provide some incentives, and with things like TAFE. But I take my hat off to what RO's doing. Like, that's awesome to hear providers who are willing to go out and provide training to one person in Renmark. Like
we met with the owners, and like I said to you earlier, you kind of get to know people during a podcast. You get an hour. I think theirs was probably an hour and a half of like genuine answers, and you can't hide. Like, it's right there.
You
and
can't.
I guess the people watching and listening might get a cut version to some degree, but not really. Most of our podcasts play straight through. And the gist that I got from them is they're both financially fine. They're in their back half of their careers. Their kids are older and have moved out, and they want to make a change. Obviously, there still needs to be an equitably intelligent. Like, it's got to be commercially viable,
of course.
But they want to make a change.
But they're obviously driven by passion for the industry too, aren't they?
Well, they both come from that world. I mean, they said they were working in RTOs for dementia care and health, and they were like, education in landscaping is vastly less bureaucratic than education in health.
Yes,
like, it
I'm
is
sure
nuts.
that is true. Well, yes, I'm sure.
Well, you think about they're like the two most complicated industries are health and education, and we were doing education in health.
Yes, that's
like,
tough. Yes, that's impressive though that people do that kind of thing. Like, and it's great for your
someone
industry.
has to, right?
They do.
So obviously there's a skills shortage that you are grossly aware of.
It's a big one.
What happens? Like, you guys get into power, and you're like, look, these are the red flags at the moment, and one of them is skills shortage.
Correct.
And what happens then? You guys sit down and come up with a solution.
That's basically right. Yeah, that's not wrong. And obviously, it was on our radar straight away, across a whole range of different.
Because it's not just landscaping.
It's everything. It's basically everything.
I saw fisheries in the list of.
Yep. It's amazing. Like, you look at the professions that are short. Like, it covers such a breadth of the jobs and labour market. It's unbelievable. And of course, the upside is that I've heard the Premier say this on a couple of occasions recently, that South Australia is almost at what would be determined technically as full employment. So there's heaps of job opportunities out there, but heaps and heaps of businesses and industries that are crying out for skilled staff. And of course, as you would know, to get someone, like, if we're to deal with the issue that is in front of us right now, that's not going to be solved straight away by having more people in training, because it's going to take them a certain number of years to get in. So it's what you can sort of try to do in the interim to alleviate that kind of stuff, and that's where the real challenge is. Like, I think things like the fee-free positions will make a real difference, but we've got to get people through. But I think one of the areas, and it may well not be so pronounced in the landscaping industry, but in other areas, the completion rates are like at 50% or below 50%.
I think ours were really high.
Yes,
Amanda mentioned that it was ridiculous. Like, because we recently did some education, and it was high. But that comes down to the quality of the administration behind it. And making sure. And I think ARO talked about that in their podcast as well, that because of their education's quite customised, because they don't complete, they don't get paid.
No, that's right.
Like, I think say if there's $300, 100 of it gets up front, 200 of it's on completion or whatever. So they rely on bankrolling that and then waiting to get paid.
Through. Yeah.
So they make sure that, like they talked about, the landscaping changed from 16 to 21, and so they had to quickly make a decision as to whether or not they were going to have to roll these students into an upgraded course, which added 2 modules, and that's when you have that drop off.
Yes.
But luckily, they took a punt and managed to
make it work.
It was fine. I guess that's the style of a privately owned company versus a government organisation.
Yes.
They go, we'll take a punt.
Yes.
But they were saying that, I think their completion rate is higher because it's their money on the table.
Yeah, so they've got all that buy-in, everything's on the line, so they have to make it work. But I think that, there's certainly a big piece of work that needs to be done, probably right across the skills and training system in Australia around completions, because the system, broadly speaking, is really inefficient.
Yeah. I guess the other alternative is immigration.
Yes. Which normally we could use as the crutch, couldn't we? We could fall back on that.
But not for the 2 years prior to this year.
Then the pandemic taught us that you can't always fall back on that, and the next minute, the arse fell out of everything. So,
I mean, excuse me, the economy might reduce the skills requirement a little bit, and hopefully it doesn't. But obviously, if people are spending money less and things slow down, then we're going to have
a reduction in demand.
Not ideal, but
no.
One of our clients is bringing in skilled labour from the Philippines, I think.
Yes.
So,
interesting. I heard that quite a bit from in the recent couple of years. I think it might have been the automotive industry in terms of looking for mechanics.
Panel beaters was the same. I had lunch with the Commonwealth Bank, and they had the panel beater there, and he's like, "You think you have trouble?" He's like, "No one's coming out of school and learning how to panel beat.
Yeah,
like it's just not a thing."
No.
But I guess you see the flip of it. I think in some years, no one's coming out of school to become a doctor or a lawyer unless.
Well, that's the thing I look at now. Because a lot of the professions that are in the most demand, where we have the most acute shortages, a lot of them are trades-based stuff, and there's really secure and well-paid work to be had in all those areas. Now, you can go straight out of high school into an apprenticeship, or not even an apprenticeship,
a traineeship,
no HECS debt.
Yeah,
so you're already starting $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a head, and be earning
for a normal
something from day one. That's right.
Yeah.
Whereas you could do what I did, and do arts and law for 5 years, and by 2004 I had $35,000 HECS debt, which I could tell you then was a lot, and it took me years and years.
Which is funny because you compare it to some of the other countries to get a law degree for $35,000.
True. Well, it's a bit more now, but true. But I mean, if you're making that kind of value judgment now as a young person or a parent, say, right, I can get my kid to go in and be a sparky. They'll be out earning money. They'll have zero HECS debt. They can be in the
which won't be much
early.
different to an entry level lawyer money.
Yeah, that's right. The lawyer thing can take off later on, but for a long time it doesn't.
If you take some time to hit partner or move into the right law as well. I mean, you could work in. There's obviously
that's exactly right. So I think the other thing is that people might not be putting their hands up for jobs that are also more complex, and teaching is one where we're finding that, because they're probably thinking, well, I could go and do this job and earn basically the same or more, and not have to go home at night and worry about my kid who's not getting this class, or student who's not getting the support that they need. So that's the other complexity to all that with.
So that obviously the government then makes a decision to make change, and it takes 4 to 8 years, and hopefully you maintain government during that process, because
we'd like to, but
do you know what I mean? Like once that starts rolling, what happens if you change government, and then the other?
Well, you'd hope that the next government would keep with something like skills,
and that happens enough.
Often, I think it happens more than the public would.
Yeah, because like infrastructure that you guys took.
Yes.
Inherited continues.
Yes, a lot of that. Exactly.
Yeah, like a lot of the roads that we're getting done, that doesn't just stop.
Yep. No, a lot of that stuff, it is continuous, and the changes that the media might focus on are often relatively small in the context of the whole
what's really happening
thing. But, I agree and totally understand that people's frustration with what they see as no long-term planning from politics, because people think, you're just looking towards the next election, and then you might get a change, and that gets chucked out.
Well, that was one of my questions, Does the system work? Like, should terms be longer, or is it perfect? Like,
it's a very, very good
obviously
question.
You compare it to countries that have no change. Yeah. They can seem to get a lot of stuff done. Obviously, there's also some real negatives that come from that.
There certainly are. I mean, this is one of the things I think about a lot, and I think every politician would, about how could our system be better. I think one of Churchill's many famous quotes was something like, "Democracy is the worst form of government apart from all the rest," which is about right. Totally imperfect. Yeah. I often think about things. Do you make terms longer? Because we've got set 4-year terms, and it is rare to be booted out after one term. We just had that, but it's rare. And if you made it 5-year terms, then you're almost locking a party in for a decade of rule straight up. That's a long time.
It was half a life for a young adult.
That's right. Yeah. So do you want that, where the public doesn't really get a chance to change? I don't think you do. So I think where we are is probably a
3 or 4.
That's right, probably about right, with 4-year terms.
Do you hit the ground running? Like, you don't you get briefed on what's going on, and you're
straight
like
away.
day 2, you're.
Yep, we get incoming briefs, which are special briefs that the department prepare. They prepare a set for the blue team and a set for the red team, and if the red team win, they provide those so you can get across.
So that government department doesn't change. Those the people that
Correct.
work for
That stays same.
the South Australian people.
Yep.
They represent Labor or Liberal.
Yes. Yep. I mean, some changes might be made by the incoming government, either quickly or not quickly, in terms of chief executives, but not always.
Yep.
Not always like that. But the vast bulk
Like if
of
they're the right
bureaucrats-
person for the job, and you've got a reasonable human being taking
you
leadership,
keep them.
they'll be like, no,
Absolutely.
this is-
Exactly. A lot of people with the change of this government have stayed in their.
and those staff are bipartisan enough in their head to be able to work for either government.
Yep, exactly right. That's their role, to be frank and fearless advice no matter who it is, and I think our public sector does a good job of that. So even though you might have change at the government kind of level with the party that's governing, you do get a lot of continuity and consistency underneath that with all the public servants who are there. But yeah, I tend to think where we're at in terms of how our system works is probably about where you want to be. Election every 4 years. The South Australian public showed at the election last year they are willing now to boot a government out after one term. That's something that I think about regularly. It's like you can take absolutely nothing for granted. Absolutely nothing in this role. The best saying I ever heard was, "You're a rooster one day and a feather duster the next day," and that is true. This could all fall apart, like that. So you make the most of every day and do what you can.
So if I'm a landscaper in South Australia at the moment and I've got a skills shortage issue, I don't have enough staff, what am I doing?
Well, I mean, of course, I'd point to the fee-free places that are there and get people in there, but I know that's not necessarily an immediate overnight solution. And I think that's the trickier part of the conversation is what we are doing, what can actually be done right now, because there is no kind of magic solution for that.
Because they're not just sitting on a shelf. You can't just go buy 10 landscapers.
Exactly. There's no people with the Cert 3s all done sitting there saying I'm not doing anything. So I think that bit is going to remain tough for a while, but I think it was great news, and I was really pleased, to see that those 2 Cert 3s for your industry were on this, because I think we all kind of have taken a while in government land to appreciate how big and important the landscaping sector is.
Well, that was one of my questions. Like, do you guys know what landscaping is? I know you do.
I mean, I certainly do now. Particularly with stuff like nature play and all that kind of stuff. Like nature play playgrounds, which I'm sure your listeners would probably be familiar with, particularly if they've got kids, are the thing I get asked for the most going to schools. Yeah. Yep. Everyone wants a nature play, or they want a covered outdoor learning area, but nature play everywhere, and everyone wants a different one. They want a unique one, and that takes skill. You're not just buying the equipment and plug it in. You need landscapers and stuff to work, and some of our best nature play areas are unbelievable pieces of art.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot of compliance there as well, isn't there? Like
there is, isn't there? Yes. Yes.
You want to make sure you're using the right skilled trades to be putting those in, because otherwise you've got some serious public risk.
You sure do. Exactly right. It's an increasingly litigious society where people will throw the book at you if their kid gets hurt or something like that. But even looking at our new school builds now, and in the last few years, there's been one at Whyalla, which is won national awards. Incredible. The secondary college there, it is incredible. There's one down at Anglevale, which is Riverbanks, Bayindi, which is down in Aldinga. Now, I reckon if you compared those new school builds compared to how a new school was built in the 1960s, I reckon the landscaping component 1960s 2%, it's 40% now.
I think the awareness around outdoor education's changed. Yeah.
But people also expect not just the building to look new; they want the grounds and the landscaping and all that kind of stuff to be top notch as well, because we now understand that's all part of the environment. It all comes down to the landscaping industry. So I think we now understand it's big bickies and a potential growth area as well for our state's economy. So I certainly felt like that. So glad to be able to support it any way we can.
So on the licensing, and this is probably a selfish question for me, I know you haven't got a lot of time, so I want to try to get some of my questions in. Yep. Like we want to make licensing more streamlined at the moment, from what I understand, and I'm still learning, as I said. There's the process to get a license to cover. There's about 24 different things that has to be on a license to be a landscaper, and from what I have been told, and I might get corrected about this, but you can only apply for about 4 or 5 of those at a time, because otherwise you're going into OCBAR with 24 and they're like, no. And then if the backlog on that's 4 to 8 months, it can take you, say, 4 or 5 years to get enough of your
Interesting.
So what would we do as an industry to then do? Like, is that just really about making you aware of it?
Yes, you approach the minister.
Yeah,
That'd be me and another minister. That could be someone like Minister Michaels, but you just send me a letter.
Yeah, and go, this is what we think needs to happen.
Correct.
What more information do you want?
We're seeking your advice on why the delays are what they are.
And I don't think the delays. I think the delays are legitimate.
Yeah.
I think that's because, obviously, off the back of staff shortages and people working from home in that market.
But it's clearly a handbrake on your.
Well, I think there's two sides. Yeah,
growth
if we
and
could
stuff,
speed it up,
isn't
that'd be good. But I think there's also the other side that it's too big. Yeah. As in, we're not saying that landscape licensing should be easy.
No,
but the process.
You're not trying to cut corners.
No. The process of getting the application through should be more simplified.
Because what you're saying isn't the thing that might be slowing it down an issue at the regulatory end.
That's right.
It's not as though they don't think people should be able to.
All of that stuff counts. So
it's not a safety thing, is it?
You think about, like, if you want to become a builder, you get a building license, and it covers the whole house.
That's right.
In landscaping, they get landscaping, paving, retaining walls to a metre, retaining walls over a metre.
Why is it done like that?
I think because landscaping hasn't been considered a trade for so long.
So it built up like that.
Yeah, and so all of a sudden it was like, well, paving's a trade, isn't it? Kind of? No, maybe not. Well, so because you think like outside...
I've done it myself. It's pretty hard.
Yeah, right. And the skill level that's required. Like, a lot can go wrong if you've got the falls going the wrong way or drainage doesn't... So then you've got drainage involved.
I'll tell you,
and I think ideally...
Yeah, the paving that I'd done myself, I tell you what, you'd shake your head. Anyway.
Well, there's probably 300 people that will listen to this that will be able to come and sort it out for you.
But these are skilled trades.
I think the idea is that they go, well, it needs to be reform, and I think I'm not the guy, and you aren't either, right? We're the guys to put the right people in touch with each other and go,
that's my job.
Well, this is our recommendation, because I'm not a landscaper, but I represent landscapers, so I go, this is the things that need to be changed, because there's just so much.
Yes.
And if you can't, you get maybe 4 on your license, so you could be licensed to do a retaining wall, but then you're not actually licensed to do paving or say outdoor tiling.
Yes.
Which is what we're seeing a lot of.
Right.
As in that's more.
That's right. So you might be licensed to do one.
Yeah, and then so someone, a homeowner will go, have you got a license to be doing this work? And they're like, yeah, here's my license. But on the back, there's only 4 categories, and there's another 20 missing. So I think
so they're doing the work without the license.
I'm not saying they are, but there definitely are people doing work unlicensed.
And I'm sure the customer wouldn't be a fan to hear, or would be confused to hear why you are licensed to do paving, but not that. Right.
So they can lay it on sand, but they can't glue it to the concrete.
Yes.
And then there's a whole multitude
drives
of
people
issues.
crazy about government.
Yeah.
You know. But
if you don't know, you can't fix it.
No, you can't, and often we don't. And I will also say, often, not always, there are things that can be done. These things actually can be fixed, but maybe it never got to the point of the end.
Last time I spoke to you, there was something that someone brought to you, and straight away you're like, we can fix that.
Yeah.
And
it's amazing how often
the
that
best
happens.
ones.
Yep. And that goes back to what we said, though, at the start of our conversation around starting the relationships with people, so they think to say, oh, you know what, that Blair, he's not a complete idiot.
Well, I think
actually, I will raise this with him because maybe he can. Whereas otherwise, people are like, you know what, there's no point in me raising things.
Well, that's what it feels. I felt like that with... Yeah. I felt like with a lot of, like, I guess, government departments. You're like, where do you start?
That's right, and so people don't start at all.
Well, and I know you're a sponsor of the Golden Grove Central District's baseball club, and we were talking down there because that club has, like, we played at the Angels, and their club's amazing.
Yes,
but
I think that was raised with me about what the Angels look like.
Oh my god! And I think it's heavily driven by. The protest, and it's probably a heavy word, but of the local residents that they don't want fencing around, and that's fine.
That has been an issue for many, many years.
But it was the same conversation. They're like, well, how do we get more funding for this club to do this, to bring more people in? And I'm like, I think the difference between the wealthy clubs and the other clubs that don't have the same
financial
I don't even know the most appropriate way to explain it, but
I know what you mean.
Is that the people, the parents of the kids at those clubs know how to get access to politicians, right? And whereas the parents from that club don't have, well, obviously they've got access to you because you're there, but they don't think, oh, maybe we could lobby.
They don't think to ask.
Yeah, we could lobby the government to get some funding to build this, and I think
that's a very real problem in society. That's right.
And that just keeps making that gap further.
It does, and people think it is always a case of politicians playing favourites, but.
More often than not, been presented with 3 options.
You don't know.
No, that's right. And you haven't. The other 3 didn't come in.
Exactly right. And you've got one club really, really loud, grabbing you at every opportunity, grabbing the premier at the street corner meeting or whatever. Then something happens, and the other club doesn't think to do that. But something like the Okbar stuff you were just talking about, I'd be keen to get my teeth into that. I'll
put something together off after this.
They're the challenges you like to have as a minister, or I do. Let's see if you can fix some historic thing like that. Yeah. Maybe you can't, but let's have a red hot go at it.
Yeah. Who's the hardest working politician
Oh, Malinauskas.
100%.
Crazy. Oh, yeah.
Would you...
It's I don't know how he does it. You look at that job and just think, oh...
He'd have obviously a team that support him as well,
He
including
does.
you. But like he's got a direct team.
Of course he does.
Yeah.
But like you said before, everyone wants Peter.
Yeah, they don't want to talk to his aides and
That's
his
right. And his
assistants.
profile is high and he's popular and out there, but he's still trying to manage the life at home with his family and young kids and stuff. But
do you think it's more manageable than being in federal politics?
it is
Because you're always here.
Federal politics. I tell you, I sometimes think I wouldn't wish that on anyone because Parliament sits for basically half the year. So because it's Canberra, for 26 weeks of the year, you're not even in your own state. So if you've got kids, it's not possible. Whereas state politics, if we sit late at Parliament, that's right. Like even if it sits to 7 o'clock, 8 o'clock, I can get home and see the kids before bed. Whereas no one...
Or even if they're asleep, you still get to give them a kiss. And,
Exactly. And maybe be there in the morning, that kind of stuff. So what we ask of federal politicians and stuff, I think is pretty unnatural. And I think the pressures it causes on family life and... It's tough. So I love the local state stuff anyway. I've always really loved that. I love the issues that get raised with me. I love, we're the ones who still run the school system and the health system and the transport system.
Your area, aren't they?
Exactly.
Well?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So
you take care of all the schools. But you can see the results.
That's right. But you still get this kind of thing, which is, do you ever want to go into federal politics? Because that's the real game. And I'm always like, if you came door knocking with me, which I don't advise because it's not a heap of fun.
Would you take a camera? That'd be fun.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. I mean, I kind of enjoy it, but I've been doing it for a while. But if you have a look at the issues that actually were raised, it's all that kind of stuff. Yeah. Local council. I very rarely get the federal things raised. People want something about their local school, rubbish collection, the local park, or the hospitals, or buses and stuff like that. It impacts them. That's right. It impacts their real lives. And that's the thing the state government is in control of. So I think state government is great. And the idea of having to be away from your family for half the year, I think, this contributes to maybe sometimes the kind of wacky stuff that might happen in Canberra. Yeah. I think because they're all away from their families so much. It's just... I know, I get it. People refer to it as a spring break.
I don't want to expand on it.
No, it's just hard. It's just hard on them.
Because my mind went straight to a few different situations that have occurred in the recent years.
Yes. And there's plenty of examples of that. But one last comment on this one. Well, a politician who will remain nameless, a long-serving federal one for South Australia, I think tells the story of leaving on a Sunday to go to the airport and having his young kids howling and running along next to the car, trying to catch the car and say, come back.
And the thing is, you don't control that, right? Like, I'm travelling a bit this year, more than I probably have, because obviously we haven't been able to go overseas for a little while. But I control that. I book those trips. Right. I choose when I'm going, and then if I choose to fly my wife and kids in to be there as well, there's no one watching it going, who paid for that? No, exactly. Are they staying in the same room as you? Are you paying for that room?
You follow it very closely.
Well,
it's exactly right. Exactly right. But for federal parliament, it's locked in.
Yeah, you have to go. Your mother. Obviously, deaths in the family and stuff. There's probably some flexibility there. But if you're not there to vote, your government don't pass something.
That's right. You got very little flexibility. Yeah. Like you have to have a really good excuse. And the other thing that's changed recently, because I was talking to Tony Zapier out.
That's who I was trying to think of. He was always around. Yeah, he's everywhere.
It works so hard. But he commented that I think Qantas changed the last direct flight on Sundays to Canberra a few years ago. So it meant that he was.
South Australians good.
So basically on Sunday in Adelaide, you get into the airport now at sort of 12 or 1 or something instead of later in the day. So
you don't get that day at home.
No, you're off even earlier.
Last question: if you could swap jobs with anyone in the world and you had the skills to do the job, anything you can think of.
Easy answer. I'd be in a band yesterday.
Yeah,
absolutely. I'd be in a punk band.
I was not expecting
punk band yesterday.
As in, have you played?
No, can't play.
But you just
can't
like
sing.
the music.
Yeah.
There you go.
I think it's a powerful medium as well.
Yeah.
I think, I'd do that like that. I think it'd be, I'd like to be good at working with engines as well. I think that'd be restoring things.
That's probably a skill you can learn in
bikes. Well, that's true, and I reckon one day if I get the chance, I will. But no, I'd be
probably easier than learning to sing. I think.
Yes, well, I am a lost cause when it comes to that. There's nothing I could do. But I'd do something like that. Yeah.
All right. Well,
wouldn't be anything like this job at all.
No, I can. Well, you still got the public eye, but
I guess
people only come to see you that want to see you. Then they're not coming there.
No,
you
it's
don't
true.
have people come to your concert to yell at you.
That's true, and you can be completely unfiltered as well on that, which would be
Oh, you've been pretty open. So thank you so much for coming in. I'm very respectful of your time. I don't want to hold you up anymore.
Really enjoyed that. You're obviously an old hand at this, mate.
Yeah, I've done a little bit of it.
You've got the knack. You've got the knack.
Look, I love this as a medium.
You're a natural at it.
If I could podcast every day, I would.
See that. It's my nose.
I would do it. I've only done.
It's not easy.
61 episodes, but
asking questions and getting a conversation to flow on things like this is much trickier than it.
My early ones are pretty bad. And I had a lady that was doing some coaching with me, and she's like, "You talk too much over your guests. You need to give them space." And
That was really enjoyable.
Well,
really enjoyable.
I think the best podcasters are engaging.
Yes.
With the conversation, because I'm genuinely interested.
Yeah,
like I'm asking questions.
But you're also
I know
across
the
your
answer to.
subject matter.
Yeah,
that's what I noticed.
So
you knew stuff about the things you were asking questions about, which meant the questions you were asking me were going to get more interesting answers.
I'm not just mailing it in.
No,
like I haven't just got out of my fancy, not saying you, but like my fancy car.
That is true.
And gone, here's your list of questions.
Yes.
Put your makeup on.
No, that's right.
Read,
I like
read,
it.
read.
It is, but it's just because like I said, you really in this job get to have sort of long, expansive interviews where you can really go into detail and talk about and give more perspective and context to why you think like you do. And so
it's not how I thought this podcast would go. I was hoping to understand a bit more landscape connected, but I don't think I could have. And
I'll come back.
And I hope. Well, and look, that's the thing. And I hope. Mate, I'll do it. Like I said, I want to do this all the time. But I hope that there's enough in there for our landscape community to hear it and go, okay, there is someone there that cares.
Yep.
They have limited abilities to make change based on time.
Yes.
You can only teach someone, unless you can get Elon to Neuralink landscaping into your brain in 4 minutes.
Yeah, I'm sure he's working
and we
on
pump it out.
Yeah.
Short of that, it's going to take 4 years,
That's
right? And the government are aware of it.
Yeah.
But until then, we just have to do the best we can. And
that's right. But if you want to do one with more specific...
I'm
back.
I'm keen to catch up and talk a little bit about... and we can probably do this like externally by phone or whatever, about how to kind of get that licensing, at least an explanation of what we think could be changed.
Yeah,
there's an apprenticeship versus traineeship conversation as well.
That's very true.
We're trying to understand,
because I think me that OCBAR kind of info.
Yeah, and just go, this is the problem.
Yeah, and if I could come back later and either say
this is what we can
why
do
it's
about
harder than we thought.
Yeah.
Well, actually,
this is really easy. Just no one's ever asked.
That's right.
The other one, I think we run
really
a traineeship.
The second option.
That'd look real good, and we'll bring it out just before the next election.
Yes.
The traineeship versus apprenticeship, something else that's on their mind, because I think we're a traineeship, not an apprenticeship, and it gets treated differently federally, but that's a whole other conversation.
Well, that's something that we can work on too.
Yeah, cool.
The federal intersection there gets tough. I find sometimes we are like, here's our case, and then it's sort of like, no.
Well, that's fine. Like, I want to, and I know you would be on the same page. I don't want to get to the end of my term.
Yeah.
And we've made no change.
I agree. That's how I feel. So, I think about that every day, and time just goes like that, doesn't it?
Well,
you can just see it back.
Yeah.
How long are your terms?
We got 1 year as president, 2 year as a member, as a board member.
A short term, mate. You need the longest.
Well, I've only got 5. I think I can only serve 4 years as president.
Consecutively or whatever.
Yeah, I might be totally actually, but that's a constitution. We got a constitution that probably needs to be.
Would there be people? Are there people jumping to get the role or
the presidency role?
Yeah. No. It's a role,
it is, but
busy.
I was the only person that was nominated, self-nominated, and I knew that it was the right time. I had a strong opinion about the way it was being run before I took over, and I have a client and a friend of mine who always said, if you're not willing to get involved, shut up. Yeah, and I was being very vocal, and so I was like, well,
good on you for
I'm going to step up. But there's some unbelievable board members. We've got a young board from an experience standpoint, but I can already see who I think should be the next president and vice president.
Succession
planning, and I don't want to be. No. It's not my I'm not a landscaper.
Yep.
I want these guys to be advocating for themselves.
That's awesome.
But in the absence of that, and they've also said the actual one of the strengths of you doing it is that you're not a landscaper. Yes. So you've got no preconceived ideas.
You know, and I think that is true. And the example I'd use that is that I'll always tell teachers I'm not an educator. I don't pretend to be. But I can be the person who tries to put the overlay on top of the issues around what is the public expectation and stuff like that, which is also what you're doing, a fresh set of eyes. Because your board's no doubt chock-a-block full of...
We try to stack it as much as we can. We've got obviously suppliers, commercial. So the thing is, because landscaping, it's commercial, residential, maintenance, and design. Yeah. So we're trying to represent designers and we're trying to represent maintenance workers, and they get left behind a lot.
But that's good. You can do that though because you're not from one of the bits.
No.
So I'd imagine if you're from one of the bits, everyone else is going to be like, you would say that.
Of course, that's right. And that's even commercial and residential. But also, I had a designer say to me, don't worry about designers. And she was speaking for herself. She's like, I don't mind. Get landscapers sorted because that's where the problem is. We don't have enough landscapers. So she's like,
that gave you the imprimatur to focus on that.
Yeah, I can't design any more work than can be installed. Right. So until that's sorted, we don't need any advocacy. We're fine. Like, let's get that sorted. I'm like, that's smart. So anyway.
Excellent, impressive. Well, thanks for having
me. Thank you.
That was awesome.
And we'll, if anyone needs to hit Blair up, you can come through me and I can get to him, or you can rock up at his office.
Happy to go through you, and you can call me. Very happy with that.
We didn't talk about the technical colleges, but people
have me back.
People, we'll do that.
If you want to, I'm very happy to.
I know we'll get out of here.
I'd like to do that.
Thanks, mate.
Good pleasure, mate. Thank you very much.